Hi Pioneers, this is Harry G from Team PiBot, and I'm going to show you how to assemble your kit. So all you need is a little Phillips screwdriver and the instructions, which you'll find on the website. So let's get going. So this is the bot box, and inside is the kit. So there are several plastic packages and they're all numbered. So you need to find number 1, start here. Let's get going. First up, we need to open the O-ring packet. And our first job is to connect the speaker plate to the sides. So the way the chassis is designed is you have these lugs and you have slots. And the idea is to slot through the lug and you fold it over with a O-ring. And that will basically join the pieces together. So let's do the other side. There we go. The next piece is the base plate, and this comes down from above. You have to splay the sides open slightly, and as you bring the top down, you'll get to a point where there's holes in the sides, and that will mean you can then pull the sides straight and then push the base down. Again, now you can just use the O-rings to lock it all into position. That's 4, and there's 2 in the middle. And these can be quite tricky to get on. You might need 2 fingers to do that. There we go. Next step is to attach the speaker. So we'll take that out of the packet. The way this is attached is using very small screws and nuts and a couple of washers. So this is one of the trickiest parts. The key to this is getting the order right. So first thing, we attach one screw at the top and we put on a nut. Make sure it's just finger tight, like this. And what this means is that when you push your speaker in, the other thing, make sure the wires are at the top. So that's at the top. And as I push it close to the speaker plate, it should basically force the speaker down slightly. So this means that when we add the next 2 screws, we'll do one at a time. So we're pushing in from the back, and this time we put a washer. And the nut on top. The idea is that the washer basically folds over the metal rim of the speaker and holds it nice and tight. So there we go, that's the speaker in place. Next up is phase 2. So let's look for bag number 2. Here we go. And this is the motor assemblies. So this is the motors and the side pieces that the motors connect to on the inside. So these have had a thread drilled into them, into the 2 holes. So these basically take the supplied screws. Okay, the way this works is that each motor has some coloured leads, and one is yellow and orange, and that's lemon on the left, and one is purple and blue, which is raspberry on the right. So we'll use lemon on the left first. So we'll go to the left side, and the axle needs to be orientated or positioned at the front. And you should find the holes in the perspex basically slot into place with the motor driver. The next thing to be careful of is to ensure the leads come up and slot into a groove in the base plate there. Then we take an inner side piece and we slot that into position. Then we take an inner side piece and we slot that into position. So here you can see that the holes marry up with the holes through the motor assembly. So when we put the screw through, like so, we can screw it into the inner side piece. You don't want to force this, just put it in until you feel it tighten, and that's enough. And then we'll do the other side. Raspberry right. Okay, there we go. We've got the motor assemblies in place. So let's move on to the third step. Third step is the Raspberry Pi undercarriage. So this goes into the center there. In this packet we also have the audio module. And that's the first place to start, is we can attach the audio module. All you need to watch out for on this piece is to make sure that the holes for the Raspberry Pi are on the bottom right and the top left. If you get it upside down, then it won't work. So make sure the holes are bottom right and top left. So here we'll put on the audio module. So that goes on top with the screws being fed in from underneath. So we'll thread them through and we'll use a little M2 nut to keep it into position. And next we're going to attach the hex spacers. Now this is what the Raspberry Pi will eventually screw into. So you put one at the top and with an M3 screw, which is 6mm long. So we feed that in from the back again. And we screw that in. And the other one. There we go. So just to finish it off, we're going to put the screws for the Raspberry Pi into position. You don't have to tighten them all the way, but I'm only putting them in so they don't get lost. Okay, now we're going to fit the Pi undercarriage onto the chassis. So the thing to watch out for here is to feed the cables for the speaker through the hole in the Pi plate. We then push on undercarriage and then use the two red O-rings to join it to the undercarriage, to the chassis. Okay, great. So now we can connect the wires. So the white wire to the left pin, the edge pin, and the grey wire to the innermost pin. These wires don't have the heat shrink on, yours wires should. So you don't want these pins touching together or these connectors touching together. Okay, now for step 4, phase 4, is the ball bearing and the battery holder, which is underneath the robot. So let's find packet 4. In this case, it's all grouped together. So you'll find you have a switch, the battery holder, and the ball bearing. And we're using the ball bearing as a ground for the electronics. So you should find that the battery holder fits between the space in the middle of the underside, between the two inner pieces. So it's a fairly tight squeeze. We're going to do it without batteries to begin with. So let's thread through the switch through one of the holes. Thread it through and put the nut back on. What we need to do now is to attach the ground washer to the ball bearing. So the way we do that is, firstly we attach a screw through the grounding washer with the 2 ground leads, and we push that in from above and through, and then we put the washer from the battery underneath, like that. So we'll hold the nut and I'll screw it in from the front. There, simples. And then the other side. There we go. Now the ball bearing acts as the rear wheel for the robot. So the next thing is to put the wheels on. That's phase number 5. So you should see a number 5 on your wheel. So the way to attach these is to take one wheel at a time. You need to hold the chassis and the body firmly in one hand, and with your other hand you need to push on the wheel and you need to turn it gently as you push, and that will lock it into position. On the other side. Now with the leads from the switch, you need to push them, you need to tuck them in up through the hole, and they need to come out here. Next step is to connect the power leads to the audio amplifier. So we take one of the red leads from the battery and we connect it to the plus 5 volt pin of the audio module. And we take one of the ground wires from the ball bearing and we connect it to the ground pin of the audio module. There we go. Now pioneers, we're going to attach the Raspberry Pi. So here's my Raspberry Pi, and you'll notice on revision 2 there are these 2 mounting holes, and this corresponds to the hex spaces on our Pi undercarriage. Now I'm going to orientate the Raspberry Pi so the SD card is at the front of the robot and the Wi-Fi and the Wi-Fi is at the back. So I should be able to see from above that I can line up the holes with the hex spaces. So I'll take the front one first. Okay, for now I'm not going to attach the pan and tilt mechanism for the PiBot because we've got enough hardware here to attach the interface board and to get things working. So I recommend doing the pan and tilt mechanism as a separate and later addition. So let's take our interface board. So we've got some jumper wires too, which will be useful. But we take the interface board and we just push it onto the GPIO pins of the Raspberry Pi. Like that. Okay, now I'm going to attach the motor driver wires to the 4 connectors on the left-hand side of the board. And the order I'm going to do it in is yellow, green, blue, and purple. You'll know soon enough when you run the code whether those jumpers need to be changed, but I think that's the right order. So the next piece is the NeoPixel, and this attaches to the back. So you should find you have your screws and nuts already connected, so we need to take them off, and you can put the screws in from underneath or above, it doesn't matter. Okay, so now we attach the wires to the interface board. You've got 3 wires for the NeoPixel. You put the left red one on the left pin. The data pin is the middle one, and that's brown. And the ground wire is on the right. So I've bent my pin slightly to help with the wire location. This is also when I put on the bridge of the pan and tilt mechanism that there's enough space. So I recommend bending the pins if you need to help with the space. So that's the NeoPixel. And the last thing is the voltage regulator. So this takes a feed in from the battery. So we have one last 5-volt wire from the switch, and that goes onto the end pin of the voltage regulator, like that. And then we have the second ground wire, and that goes on to the second pin. Then we need to attach the outputs of the voltage regulator onto the interface board. So the order for that is to have the ground on the left and the regulated and unregulated voltages on the right. So I can push that on the board like so. Final thing is to put the mini jack cable and plug that into the mini jack output of the Pi. There we are. So the last thing to do then is to just attach batteries to the PiBot. So if you look underneath, you can basically pull out your battery holder, and you need to attach 4 rechargeable or normal AA batteries, and then you put it back into position, and the last thing to do is to put the holder plate over the battery holder with a couple of red O-rings, and that completes the build. Before we finish, I want to give a couple of tips on using the interface board. So the first thing is to reset the microcontroller. So the way to do that is to use a jumper wire. We connect together the 2 end pins of this 6-pin header. So a simple touch is enough to reset the microcontroller. The last thing I want to recommend is updating the firmware of the microcontroller. So this can be done through the serial connection on the interface board. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have fun building your PiBot. Please look out on the website for further updates and feel free to get in touch with any questions or comments.